The Blackthorn Directive Chapter 1. Arrival October 12, 1978. 14:37. The moment I stepped off the train in Blackthorn, Montana, I should have turned back. The air was sharp with the smell of pine and coal smoke, and the town felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. I'd been warned about Blackthorn Penitentiary, but ambition blinded me. At 32, I was the new deputy warden, handpicked to oversee a facility most in the Montana Department of Corrections pretended didn't exist. My name is Samuel Pierce, and this is how I learned what fear really means. The train station was a splintered platform with a single bench, its paint peeling like old skin. A man in a gray overcoat waited for me, his face half hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. "Pierce," he called, voice rough as gravel. I nodded, hefting my suitcase. "Henry Walsh, acting warden. Let's move. Storm's coming." He didn't shake my hand, just turned toward a rusted Ford pickup idling nearby. The sky was a bruise, heavy with clouds rolling in from the Bitterroot Mountains that we drove in silence, the road winding through dense forest. Blackthorn Penitentiary loomed at the edge of a valley, a squat fortress of gray stone and iron, its walls stained with decades of frost and neglect. No fences, no guard towers, just a single gate flanked by two concrete pillars carved with faded symbols I couldn't read. The nearest town was 50 miles east, a speck called Red Gulch with a diner and a gas pump. Isolation was the prison's first defense. Inside, the heat was oppressive, a stark contrast to the October chill. Walsh led me through a maze of security checks, keycards, retinal scanners, and a heavy steel door that groaned like it resented being opened. The guards watched me with guarded eyes, their uniforms crisp but their faces tired. "You'll get the full briefing tonight," Walsh said, tossing my suitcase onto a cot in a sparse office. "Read the manual. Don't skip a page." He pointed to a thick binder on the desk, its cover stamped with classified, "Warden's Eyes Only." The title inside read, "Blackthorn Penitentiary Operational Protocols and Containment Measures." Containment. The word stuck in my throat. "What kind of inmates are we dealing with?" I asked. Walsh's eyes flickered, and for a moment, I saw something like pity. "You'll see. Just follow the rules." He left me alone, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. Chapter 2. The Manual October 12, 1978. 19:22. The office was a concrete box with a single window overlooking the valley. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass. I opened the manual, expecting standard prison protocols. Instead, I found rules that made my skin crawl. Rule 1. Never open cell block doors between 2:22 a.m. and 3:33 a.m. If access is required, consult the facility chaplain first. Rule 2. Maintain iron dust lines along all cell thresholds. Replace daily at dawn. If lines are disturbed, evacuate the block immediately. Rule 3. If the temperature exceeds 90 degrees Fahrenheit, initiate lockdown protocol 4. Do not investigate heat spikes alone. Rule 4. The chaplain's office must remain occupied at all times. If vacant for over 12 hours, contact the emergency line. Rule 5. Communication with inmate 0 to 13 is permitted only through smoked glass. Avoid direct eye contact at all costs. Rule 6. If you hear laughter from empty cells, seal the affected level and do not investigate. Rule 7. The furnace must remain operational. Power failure constitutes a facility-wide emergency. I read the list twice, certain it was a prank. Iron dust, smoked glass, laughter from empty cells. But the manual's tone was deadly serious, with references to incidents dating back to 1923. I flipped to the appendices, finding a handwritten note tucked inside. "Samuel, if you're reading this, you're already in too deep. Follow the rules. They're all that's keeping you alive." E. Carver, the previous deputy warden, who'd left abruptly for medical reasons. I set the note aside, my hands unsteady. The clock read 21:15. I had a staff meeting in the morning, but sleep felt impossible. The prison was too quiet, the silence pressing against my eardrums like a physical weight. Chapter 3. First Impressions October 13, 1978. 06:00. The staff meeting introduced me to Blackthorn's key personnel. Margaret Klein, chief of security, was a wiry woman with a smoker's rasp and eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Paul Grayson, the facility psychologist, was soft-spoken, his hands constantly fidgeting with a pen. Father Daniel Reed, the chaplain, was younger than I expected, with a nervous smile and a habit of glancing at the ceiling. "How long have you been here?" I asked Reed after the meeting. "For months," he said, adjusting his collar. "Replaced Father Callahan after his retirement." His hesitation hung in the air. I didn't press. Klein gave me a tour of the cell blocks. The corridors were narrow, the air thick with the smell of bleach and something metallic I couldn't place. The inmates were unlike any I'd seen in my decade of corrections work. They stood motionless in their cells, staring at the walls with unblinking eyes. No chatter, no movement, just an eerie stillness that made my skin prickle. "What are they in for?" I asked Klein as we passed Block A. Her jaw tightened. "Read their files. It's all there." But when I checked the files later, they were redacted to the point of uselessness. No names, just numbers. Charges listed as classified incident or multiple casualties. Inmate 013's file was the strangest. No trial, no sentencing, just a note in red ink. Extreme caution. Smoked glass protocol mandatory. That evening, I called my wife, Ellen, from my quarters above the administrative wing. Her voice was a lifeline to normalcy. "How's Blackthorn?" she asked. "Cold," I said, watching snow dust the window. "Different." We talked about her teaching job, the house we were saving for, the life we wanted. It felt like a dream from another world. Chapter 4, Disturbances, October 14, 1978. 08:45. The first sign something was wrong came during morning rounds. The iron dust lines outside Block B were disturbed, not scattered but arranged into sharp, angular patterns that seemed to shift when I looked away. "What caused this?" I asked Klein, who was overseeing the replacement. She shrugged, but her eyes darted to the cell doors. "Happens sometimes. We replace it and move on. Iron doesn't move itself," I said. She didn't answer, just motioned for a guard to sweep the patterns away. That afternoon, a heat spike triggered an alarm. The thermometer in Block C read 92 degrees Fahrenheit, impossible for a building kept at a steady 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I initiated Lockdown Protocol 4, as the manual instructed. Within minutes, the temperature normalized, but the maintenance crew found no explanation. No faulty heaters, no broken vents. "Old building," the technician said, avoiding my eyes. "Weird quirks. But I'd worked in old prisons before. This wasn't a quirk. This was something else." That night, I found a new note in the manual, slipped between pages I'd already read. "Pierce, check the chaplain's office tonight. Reed's hiding something. EC." My pulse quickened. Carver again. Against my better judgment, I made my way to Father Reed's office after hours. The door was ajar, and inside, I found him hunched over a journal, scribbling furiously. He flinched when I knocked. "Warden Pierce," he stammered, closing the journal. "Didn't hear you." His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded too quickly. "Just preparing for services." But the journal's cover was etched with the same angular symbols I'd seen in the iron dust. Chapter 5. The Chaplain's Warning, October 15, 1978. 11:12. Father Reed found me in the cafeteria at noon, his hands trembling as he clutched a cup of coffee. "You've read the manual," he said, not a question. "You think it's strange." I nodded, wary. Strange is one word for it. He leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "This isn't a prison, Samuel. It's a cage for things that don't belong in our world. The inmates, they're not men. Not anymore." Before I could respond, he stood and left, his coffee untouched. I followed, but he'd vanished into the labyrinth of corridors. That afternoon, I reviewed security footage from the previous night. At 2:22 a.m., the cameras in Block A flickered, showing empty cells. But when I switched to infrared, faint shapes moved in the darkness, tall, jagged forms that left no heat signature. They paused at the iron dust lines, as if testing them, then retreated. My stomach churned. I called Klein to the security office. "How long has this been happening?" I demanded, pointing at the screen. She hesitated. "A few weeks. Walsh told us to keep it quiet." "Why?" Her eyes met mine, and I saw fear. "Because if we report it, they'll burn this place down with us inside." Chapter 6. The Heat, October 16, 1978. 03:15. I woke to the sound of alarms. The temperature in Block D had spiked to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, triggering lockdown protocol 4 again. I grabbed the manual and ran to the control room, where Klein was already coordinating the response. The heat was unbearable, the air shimmering like a desert mirage. Guards reported condensation on the walls forming patterns. More of those angular symbols. Replace the iron dust. I ordered, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. The maintenance crew complied, but the new lines began to blacken within minutes, as if burned from below. Dr. Grayson appeared, his glasses fogged with sweat. "This isn't mechanical," he said. "It's them." "Them?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. He didn't elaborate, just handed me a tape recorder. "Listen to this. From my last session with inmate 0 to 13. I played the tape in my office later. The voice was human at first, calm and articulate, but it shifted into something layered, like multiple speakers overlapping in a language I didn't recognize. Laughter followed, cold and sharp, cutting off abruptly as the tape ended. I found Grayson in his office, surrounded by files marked with the same symbols. "What are they?" I asked. He looked up, his face gaunt. "They're what's left when you strip away humanity. They've been here longer than us, and they're patient." Chapter 7. The Disappearance, October 17, 1978. 12:03. Father Reed didn't show for morning chapel. His absence triggered protocols I hadn't noticed before: mandatory searches, sealed logs, and a check of his office. I found it ransacked, books torn apart, icons shattered, the same angular symbols carved into the desk. The journal was gone, but a single page remained, torn and crumpled. "They're waking up. The iron won't hold." God help us that we searched the facility, level by level. The deeper we went, the stranger the prison became. Corridors seemed to stretch longer than they should, angles bending in ways that hurt my eyes. In the maintenance tunnels, I heard whispers, Ellen's voice, my mother's, even my childhood dog's bark. Klein grabbed my arm. "Don't listen. They mimic what you love to lure you." "Who?" I demanded. She didn't answer, just led me back to the surface. That night, I found scratches on my office door, 3 parallel lines, too deep for human nails. I told myself it was vandalism, but the marks were fresh, the edges glinting under the fluorescent lights. Chapter 8. The Truth, October 18, 1978. 04:00. I couldn't sleep. The security monitors showed the inmates standing motionless, as always, but now I noticed their eyes, reflective, like a cat's in the dark. At 2:22 a.m., the laughter started, echoing from empty cells in Block B. I sealed the level, as the manual instructed, but the sound followed me, seeping through the walls that I in my office. I found a hidden compartment in Walsh's desk, containing files marked Blackthorn Directive, supernatural containment. The inmates weren't criminals. They were entities, captured by a government program in the 1930s after a mining accident in Blackthorn uncovered something ancient. The files described creatures that fed on fear, bound by rituals older than the town itself. Iron dust replaced sacred ash, smoked glass replaced shamanic mirrors, but the purpose was the same: containment. Photographs showed their true forms: limbs too long, faces that shifted like smoke, eyes that burned through the paper. A memo dated 1977 warned of containment degradation, recommending facility destruction if the barriers failed. I realized Blackthorn wasn't a prison. It was a tomb, and I was its keeper. Chapter 9. The Breach, October 19, 1978. 05:45. The furnace failed at dawn. The temperature plummeted, frost coating every surface. Emergency power couldn't sustain the containment systems. On the monitors, I watched the iron dust lines dissolve, cell doors creaking open. The inmates shed their human forms, revealing nightmares of bone and shadow. Inmate 0 to 13 appeared on camera, its body a mass of jagged edges and eyes that glowed like embers. It moved through walls, leaving scorch marks in its wake. Klein and I barricaded ourselves in the control room, but the radio crackled with military chatter. Containment breach confirmed. Initiate Blackthorn protocol. No survivors expected. We have to reach the emergency beacon, Klein said, her voice steady despite the chaos. The beacon was in sublevel 3, a place not on any map. We fought through corridors that pulsed with unnatural heat, pursued by laughter and whispers that knew my name. In sublevel 3, we found cells carved from obsidian, their bars etched with symbols that bled when touched. Inmate 0 to 13 waited, its voice a chorus of screams. Samuel Pierce, it said. You've served us well. Your wife Ellen grades papers tonight, alone in Red Gulch. She doesn't know what's coming. I aimed my pistol, loaded with iron-tipped rounds Reed had blessed before vanishing. The creature laughed, unaffected, and the walls began to close in. Chapter 10. The End. October 20, 1978. 06:22. Klein didn't make it. The thing that was once inmate 0 to 13 tore through her like paper, her screams echoing as I ran. I reached the beacon, a relic of Cold War tech, and activated it, broadcasting our location. The creatures closed in, their forms shifting between human and horror. I thought of Ellen, of the life we'd never have, and triggered the Blackthorn protocol. The facility shook as explosives detonated, collapsing sublevel 3. I sprinted through crumbling tunnels, the creatures' roars drowned by the rumble of stone. I emerged into the snow just as helicopters arrived, their searchlights cutting through the storm. The official report called it a gas leak, the facility a total loss. I was the only survivor. Now, I work at a county jail in Oregon, overseeing petty thieves and drunk drivers. Ellen and I are trying to rebuild, but the nightmares don't stop. Last month, a letter arrived, unmarked. Blackthorn Penitentiary 2, operational. Your presence requested. December 1st, 1978. I burned it, but the whispers follow me, and the scratches on my door reappear each night. Some cages hold men. Others hold things that were never meant to walk the earth, and someone has to keep them locked away. Conclusion. The weight of the cage. October 21, 1978. 03:14. The snow stung my face as I stumbled from the emergency hatch, the roar of collapsing concrete and steel fading behind me. Blackthorn Penitentiary was gone, reduced to a smoldering crater beneath the Montana sky. The helicopters hovered above, their blades slicing through the storm, their searchlights pinning me like a specimen under glass. I was the sole survivor, or so the military personnel who pulled me from the wreckage believed. They didn't know what I'd seen, what I'd fought, what I'd left buried under tons of rubble. They didn't know that survival was an escape. Not from Blackthorn, not from what it guarded. The debriefing took place in a sterile room at an unmarked military base, somewhere north of Missoula. The walls were bare, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and cigarette smoke. A man in a gray suit sat across from me, his face as featureless as the walls. He called himself Agent Carter, though I doubted that was his real name. His questions were precise, clinical, designed to extract details without revealing anything. What caused the structural failure, Mr. Pierce? He asked, his pen hovering over a notepad. Generator malfunction, I said, repeating the lie I'd been coached to deliver by the rescue team. Extreme weather. Old building. Carter's eyes narrowed, but he didn't press. He knew I was lying, just as I knew he was hiding something. The files I'd found in Walsh's desk, the Blackthorn Directive, had made it clear this wasn't the first time a facility like Blackthorn had failed. There were others, scattered across the country, maybe the world. Prisons that weren't prisons, cages for things that defied explanation. Carter slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table, its pages heavy with legal jargon and veiled threats. Sign this, he said, and forget Blackthorn ever existed. I signed, but forgetting was impossible. The scratches on my office door, the laughter from empty cells, the way inmate 013's eyes burned through the smoked glass, they were etched into my mind, as permanent as the symbols carved into sublevel 3. I was released 3 days later, flown to Portland, Oregon, with a new job waiting at a minimum security county jail. The official report declared Blackthorn a total loss, its destruction blamed on a gas leak exacerbated by a blizzard. The site was sealed, declared environmentally hazardous, and erased from public records. I tried to slip back into normal life, to be the husband Ellen deserved, the man who could sleep through the night without waking in a cold sweat. But normalcy was a lie, and Blackthorn's shadow clung to me like frost. November 1st, 1978. 22:47. Our new apartment in Portland smelled of fresh paint and cedar, a small 2-bedroom place near the Willamette River. Ellen was grading papers at the kitchen table, her hair pulled back, her glasses slipping down her nose. She looked up as I poured coffee, her smile soft but worried. "You haven't been sleeping," she said. It wasn't a question. I shrugged, staring at the steam rising from my mug. "Just adjusting," I lied. She didn't push, but her eyes lingered, searching for the man who'd left for Blackthorn a month ago. That man was gone, buried under the same rubble as the creatures I'd fought. The county jail was a world apart from Blackthorn. The inmates were human, petty thieves, drunk drivers, tax evaders. Their complaints were mundane: bad food, noisy cellmates, slow mail. I walked the corridors, checked logs, signed off on parole recommendations, but every task felt hollow. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the air too clean. I missed the oppressive weight of Blackthorn's concrete walls, the way they seemed to pulse with secrets. At least there, I'd known the truth, even if it terrified me. Here, I was pretending to be normal, and the effort was exhausting. At night, the nightmares came. I saw sublevel 3, its obsidian cells and bleeding symbols. I heard the laughter, sharp and cold, echoing from nowhere. Sometimes it was Ellen's voice, calling me from the darkness, begging me to open a door I couldn't see. Other times, it was inmate 0 to 13, its jagged form towering over me, its voice a chorus of screams promising to find her, to find us. I'd wake gasping, my hands clutching the sheets, the room too warm, too quiet. Ellen would stir beside me, her hand finding mine, but I couldn't tell her the truth. The non-disclosure agreement was one thing, but the real barrier was fear. If I spoke the words, demons, containment, Blackthorn, she'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. November 15th, 1978. 09:22. The letter arrived in an unmarked envelope, slipped into the stack of mail at the jail. My name was typed in block letters, no return address. I opened it in my office, the door locked, the blinds drawn. A single sheet of paper, typed and unsigned. Blackthorn Penitentiary 2, now operational. Your expertise is required. Reporting date, December 1st, 1978. I burned it in the ashtray, watching the paper curl into ash, but the words lingered. They'd found me. Whoever they were, the agency behind Carter, the architects of the Blackthorn Directive, they weren't done with me. That I tried to ignore it, to focus on my work, on Ellen, on the life we were building. But the signs were everywhere. A sudden heat spike in the jail's boiler room, the thermometer hitting 90 degrees Fahrenheit for no reason. Scratches on my car door, 3 parallel lines that gleamed in the moonlight. Whispers in the empty corridors at night, too faint to make out but unmistakable in their tone. Hungry, patient, waiting. I started carrying a small mirror, a habit from Blackthorn's protocols, checking reflections for distortions. The guards noticed, their glances shifting from respect to concern, but they didn't ask. They didn't need to. They'd heard the rumors about Blackthorn, the kind of place that chewed up careers and spat out ghosts. November 30th, 1978. 23:59. Tomorrow was the reporting date. I hadn't responded to the letter, hadn't acknowledged it, but I knew they'd come for me. The agency didn't ask for volunteers, it demanded service. I sat in our living room, Ellen asleep upstairs, the television flickering with late-night static. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm. I pulled the mirror from my pocket and angled it toward the window. For a moment, I saw nothing but my own tired face, bags under my eyes, stubble I hadn't bothered to shave. Then, in the corner of the glass, a shadow moved, too tall, too angular, its eyes glinting like embers. I dropped the mirror, my heart pounding. The room was empty, the static on the TV unbroken, but I knew what I'd seen. It wasn't gone. None of them were. The collapse of Blackthorn hadn't destroyed them. It had only delayed their escape. The files had mentioned 17 entities, but there were hints of others, older and stronger, buried deeper than sublevel 3. The Blackthorn Directive wasn't just about containment. It was about sacrifice, about men like me standing between the world and the things that wanted to consume it. I thought of Ellen, of the life we'd planned, of the house we'd never finished paying for. I thought of the other facilities, the ones mentioned in Walsh's files, 17 prisons, each guarding its own horrors. If Blackthorn was any indication, they were failing, one by one, their barriers weakening as the entities grew stronger. I'd seen what happened when containment broke, felt the cold of sublevel 3, heard the laughter that wasn't human. I couldn't let that reach Ellen, couldn't let it reach anyone. December 1st, 1978. 06:00. The phone rang at dawn, a shrill sound that cut through the silence. I answered, expecting Carter's voice, but it was a woman, her tone clipped and professional. "Mr. Pierce, your transport leaves at 0900. Be ready." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the kitchen, the receiver still in my hand, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I could run, take Ellen and disappear, but where would we go? The agency had found me once, they'd find me again. And the entities, they knew my name, my face, Ellen's voice. There was no hiding from them that I wrote Ellen a letter, my hands shaking as I explained I'd been called away for a temporary assignment. I didn't mention Blackthorn, didn't mention the creatures, or the scratches, or the mirror. I told her I loved her, that I'd be back soon, that she should keep the doors locked and the lights on. It was a lie, but it was all I could give her. I left the letter on the kitchen table, next to her coffee mug, and slipped out before she woke. The transport was a black van, no markings, no windows. Two men in suits waited inside, their faces as blank as Carter's. They didn't speak as we drove, the road stretching into the fog-shrouded mountains. I clutched the mirror in my pocket, its edges digging into my palm, a reminder of the rules I'd memorized at Blackthorn. Smoked glass, iron dust, never trust the voices. I didn't know where we were going, but I knew what waited there. Another facility, another cage, another fight to keep the world safe. December 2nd, 1978. 14:22. The new facility was called Iron Hollow, buried deep in the Idaho wilderness. It was smaller than Blackthorn, its walls smoother, its technology newer, but the air carried the same weight, the same sense of something ancient and hungry watching from the shadows. The warden, a woman named Clara Holt, met me at the gate. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp, but I saw the same exhaustion I'd seen in Walsh, the same fear hidden behind professionalism. "You've been briefed?" she asked, leading me through security checks that mirrored Blackthorn's, retinal scanners, keycards, a door that groaned like it was alive. "Not fully," I said. She handed me a manual, its cover identical to Blackthorn's, the words Iron Hollow Containment Protocol stamped in red. "Read it tonight," she said. "Every word. And Pierce, don't trust anyone until you've seen their reflection." The office they gave me was a carbon copy of Blackthorn's, concrete walls, a single window, a desk with a locked drawer. I opened the manual, my hands already trembling. The rules were different but familiar. Copper wire instead of iron dust, candlelight instead of smoked glass, a curfew from 1:11 a.m. to 2:22 a.m. The inmates were listed by numbers, their files redacted, their charges vague. Anomalous incident, containment required. Inmate 0-07's file stood out, a single note in red, avoid auditory exposure. Ear protection mandatory. That night, I heard it, a low hum, like a tuning fork struck deep underground. It wasn't music, wasn't language, but it carried intent, a promise of something vast and unstoppable. I checked the mirror, saw my reflection flicker, and knew I was back in the cage. Not Blackthorn, but something worse. Something older, January 15th, 1979. 02:47. Iron Hollow was a lie, just like Blackthorn. The inmates weren't human, hadn't been for centuries. The files called them anomalies, but Holt was blunt. They were gods, or as close to gods as the world could bear. Trapped by rituals, bound by technology, but never truly contained. I followed the rules, checked the copper wires, lit the candles, avoided the hum. But the signs were there, scratches on my door, heat spikes that melted steel, reflections that didn't match the faces I saw. Holt was my only ally, or so I thought. She knew the truth, had seen the entities in their true forms, shapes that burned the eyes, voices that broke the mind. But she was changing, her movements too fluid, her smile too wide. I checked her reflection one night, saw the distortion, and knew she was gone. Iron Hollow was failing, just as Blackthorn had, and I was alone again. February 3rd, 1979. 05:19. The hum became a scream, and the containment barriers collapsed. I fought my way to the emergency beacon, the entities closing in, their forms no longer pretending to be human. I triggered the Iron Hollow Protocol, the explosions shaking the earth, burying the gods beneath the Idaho mountains. I escaped, barely, the helicopters finding me in the snow, their pilots silent as they flew me to another base, another debriefing, another non-disclosure agreement. Now, I'm in California, working at a juvenile detention center. The kids are troubled, but human. I check their reflections anyway. Ellen thinks I'm healing, but she doesn't know about the new letter, the one that arrived last week. Ashenvault Penitentiary, operational. Reporting date, March 1st, 1979. I haven't burned it yet. I don't know if I will. The truth is, there's no end to this. Blackthorn, Iron Hollow, Ashenvault, they're all part of the same machine, a network of cages built to hold back the inevitable. The entities aren't just prisoners. They're pieces of something larger, something that's waking up. I see it in my dreams, a vast darkness that stretches across the world, patient and eternal. I hear it in the whispers that follow me, in the scratches that appear on every door I passed. I think of Ellen, of the life we might have had, and I know I can't run. Someone has to stand guard, to keep the rules, to hold the line. But each time I fight, I lose a piece of myself. Each facility takes something: hope, sanity, the belief that the world is worth saving. I don't know how many more I can survive, how many more letters I can burn before I answer the call. Some prisons hold men, others hold gods. And men like me were the keys, the locks, the sacrifices. The cycle never ends, and neither does the fear. I check the mirror one last time, see my reflection flicker, and wonder how long I have before I'm not human anymore.